It was a little over a year ago when we put our first episode up, Shoemaker's Lost Treasure. The fact of the matter is, almost since I started my current career, which found me driving long distances throughout Pennsylvania, I had toyed with and was encouraged by friends to begin this quasi-radio history mythology thing which we have here today. Despite all the long drives of daydreams and startup and stop writing, it would be 5 years before I actually began in earnest, and even then nothing would have gone very far were it not for the technical help and direction of Bond. But the catalyst for action has been two people, both of whom I was never able to meet, but their writings helped shape the identity of our endeavor. So these two writers, first off, there's James York Glim, whose Flatlanders and Ridge Runners, folk tales from the mountains of northern Pennsylvania, I first found while spending a lunch break in the Smethport Public Library. We'll talk about Dr. Glim another time, because right now we need to talk about the elephant in the room, that being the Shoemaker of Shoemaker's Lost Treasure, our first episode. Henry Shoemaker looms large in the annals of Pennsylvania, but the reviews are mixed. It has been said that if you've ever stopped and read a state plaque, you've likely read the words of Henry Shoemaker. Now, this isn't a profile of Shoemaker, but that is something we have in the works and which we hope to publish sometime prior to Thanksgiving. To date, it'll be the most research-intensive episode. What Bond and I have here today is an excerpt from one of Shoemaker's early books, specifically Pennsylvania Mountain Stories, which was originally published in 1908 and is one, again, of his earlier books. I first found Pennsylvania Mountain Stories at the Butler Public Library about 4 or 5 years ago. Shoemaker, who my understanding is accused of fabricating as much as he documented, wrote a foreword to the 1911 edition in which he states that none of the tales are created by himself, and that the tales collected in this volume were gathered by him during a college trip through Pennsylvania's northern tier. This story comes from that 1911 edition of Pennsylvania Mountain Stories, and is timely as we prepare for Halloween, especially timely for those of you living near Liverpool in Perry County. This is The Haunted Tavern. At the approach of evening, a heavy fog arose, making the navigation of the timber rafts a difficulty in the big river. The mountainous shores were completely veiled from sight, as were even the lights in the cottage windows of Liverpool. Big raindrops pattered, waves washed over rafts, and logs creaked and slapped in the uncertain current. The steersmen lit their watch lights and called aloud their warnings to prevent collisions, and vainly looked about for places of refuge until morning. On a raft of spars bound for Marietta were two brothers, Jacob and Richie Vale, who, although they had been rivermen all their lives, were a trifle apprehensive on this occasion. The current and fog had forced them close to shore, and as they beat around for a comfortable eddy, they noticed a big building loom out through the darkness on a neck of a land which ran out into the river. To this they steered, made fast, and abandoned the raft for the night. No light shone on the barred windows of this house, but nonetheless, the brothers knocked at the door. To their surprise, it was instantly opened by a young woman who, as she stood there shading the candle with her hand, produced an impression on them which they never forgot. Of medium height, with straight black hair and pallid face, she had, like Victor Hugo's Duchess Josiana, one pale blue eye, while the other was brown. Her countenance was withal peculiarly attractive. She had heard of their predicament. She invited them in, explaining that her house was a raftsman's tavern. Richie, who was somewhat of a ladies' man, inquired if she had a male companion in the enterprise, to which the young woman replied that she had been alone since her husband died 2 years since. After supper, Jacob, feeling very tired, asked to be shown to his room, while Richie declared that he would like to keep company with the young widow by the fireside. The room in which Jacob was domiciled for the night was a large size, and the one chair, washstand, and long-legged bed seemed diminutive in comparison. There was no loft above, and the square-hewed rafters and arched roof through which the rain leaked was like a haymow of a barn rather than a bedroom. The woman handed him her candle, said good night, and as he undressed he could hear the buzz of her conversation with Richie. He blew out the candle and climbed into the long-legged bed and covered himself with 2 or 3 patchwork quilts in preparation for much-needed sleep. But in less than 5 minutes he was rudely disturbed. First one quilt, then the second, then the third was pulled from him by unseen hands and thrown in a heap in the furthermost corner of the room. He looked up, thinking it was some joke of Richie's, but could see no one. He jumped from bed, got the comforts, and recovered himself, only to have them seized again. A third time he regained his coverings, and held on to them with the stoutest grip, but was powerless to prevent their removal. He ran over to the washstand and groped about for matches to light his candle, but there were none to be found. As he started for the door to call for help, unseen hands hurled him across the room, where he struck the wall with a terrific thud. The more he struggled, the more he was forced against the wall, as if held there by a hurricane. His clothes were thrown from the chair and lay in disorder on the floor, and in his helplessness his watch was lifted from under the pillow, and he could hear the crystal shatter as it smashed against the rafters. His cries for help brought Richie and the woman to the door, but they were unable to open it, although there was no key for the lock. They hammered and banged on the door, while poor Jacob held tight by an invisible intruder. Suddenly the door flew open. Richie and his companion were hurled upon the floor. Jacob fell in a limp mass, and the comforts whisked across the room and readjusted themselves upon the bed. Richie's lantern was extinguished in the excitement, but all hands found their way to the stairs and fled from the bewitched apartment. Once downstairs, the woman tried her utmost to coax the raftsmen to remain, promising them better quarters, but they cursed the tavern and its devilish occupants, and in the uncertain haze of dawn hurried to the water's edge and loosened the rafts from its moorings. At their next stop they met a gang of raftsmen who laughed when they informed them of the awful night's experience. "Why, that's the haunted tavern," they explained. "That woman's husband, 2 raftsmen, and an Irishman were murdered in that room at a dance 2 years ago. And from that time there's been some hellish happenings in that big room under the roof, and it's pretty certain that one night is all you'll want to spend in it." The unsavory reputation of the log tavern spread to the entire rafting fraternity. An odd-eyed young woman was forced to abandon the premises for lack of custom. For a number of years the structure was unoccupied, and latterly was used for a cow stable until the great flood of 1889 carried it away.